Welcome back to Oak Haven. Time for another trip through the woods to see what's currently up. It's April 28th, I believe, right now, so we're still in spring, so we can still call these spring wildflowers, although at some point they'll gradate into summer wildflowers. But we're looking at spring wildflowers right now. We'll do a little bit of review of things that we've looked at and look at some new things. So as I'm walking through here, you can see the Woodland Phlox that has this pretty pink color. It has this heart-shaped petal that we've talked about other times. That's a different. You can have phlox that doesn't have that notch in it. This is just a different subspecies. There's also right here Violet Wood-Sorrel. There's just a carpet of this Violet Wood-Sorrel. I'll have to show you some. This is a newer one that we haven't talked about before. It's also kind of a similar color to the phlox. It's a Oxalis. Next to it down here is Spring Beauty. Spring Beauty has these pretty white to pink flowers with these pink lines through them. These you can see that it's starting to set seed. It has kind of a grass-like leaf down here. Kind of the major plant that's showing up now in the woods is this, what I would call false Solomon seal. Let's step back here a little bit. It's not technically a Solomon seal, so it's probably more accurate to call it a Solomon's plume, but you can see where the flower is coming off the end. He's just in bud right now, coming off the end of the stem there. So I'd always learned that false Solomon seal comes off the front. So regular Solomon seal, they dangle down in bells off the bottom. We have the Toadshade, the Trillium Sessile, or Sessile Trillium, here with these mottled leaves. There's some of the small-flowered buttercup, living up to its name with very, very small flowers here. I kind of wanted to point out this tree that we're standing underneath. This is a beech tree. We talk about beech trees in one of our videos on winter tree identification and talk about the long bud. And I think it's interesting to see how that long bud is now opening up and these leaves are unfurling. Very folded leaves. They make a really pretty texture. They were all those leaves were folded up in that bud, all ready to go. The cells were all ready to just start expanding up now that spring is sprung and the tree can start collecting its energy from the sun. Down here by these Woodland Phlox, we've got this plant called Spring Avens. Avens, we've got a couple of different avens, white avens and spring avens. They grow with this rosette of highly dissected leaves here. This is spring avens, which has this very diminutive little yellow flower at the end. Let me pull another one over here and see if it's any better. That one's a little better. Spring avens, white avens has a white flower and it's bigger. Looking on the ground here, here's large-leafed waterleaf. It's not in bloom yet, it will bloom later. It has a furry stem and then the leaves that are stained that look like they have water spots on them. This is what's commonly called wild licorice. Kind of a funny name because if you pick it, supposedly it has a taste of licorice. I don't detect any taste here. And if you pull up the roots, I'm going to smell the roots rather than eat the roots because they're covered with dirt. Very little. I can maybe make out some like the black licorice smell to it, but not very much at all. But this is a bedstraw that has the common name wild licorice. There's another plant that we have that is sometimes called wild licorice. It's also called Smooth Ciceley, and it's called Aniseroot, and that's just starting to bloom. So if we find some of that, I'll show you some of that. That has a very strong black licorice smell to it. So hopefully we'll find some of that and I can show it to you. Hi everybody, you guys like the licorice smell, huh? Okay, Kimber. We have a whole patch here of Mayapple, these umbrellas here. And we've talked about them before, but they were just in bud, and now they're in their full glory blooming. So the ones that have the 2 leaves will have a flower that grows up in the where the leaves come together. This is Mayapple. This will produce a fruit in a little while. The fruit is edible once it's yellow, and it's poisonous while it's green. Here, actually, this is that Aniseroot that I was talking about. We'll find one that's in bloom, but you can, it's very strong licorice smell. I like black licorice. I'm the only one in my family that likes black licorice, so I don't know, it must be every family has one person who likes black licorice, so that somebody's there to eat those jelly beans. This is the time of year where it's hard to walk in the woods because there's so much on the forest floor. You just can't take a step without stepping on something. So here in this patch of Mayapples here, and we've got the Solomon's Plume. Down as a ground cover, down here on the ground, is the wild ginger. We talked a little bit about wild ginger, but really haven't looked at it closely because it was in bud but not in bloom. If you look at the base of the wild ginger, you find the wild ginger flower. It's pollinated by beetles and insects that are more likely to be crawling along the ground. It's not trying to attract pollinators that would fly through the air and might be attracted to a more colorful flower. So the flower is purple. It has the kind of color of raw meat and has kind of a similar smell to attract those beetles, because that's how it's pollinated. Wild ginger is interesting. I'm going to pick this flower and bring it up here. All plants would rather be pollinated by another plant. That gives them genetic diversity. They don't want to be pollinated by themselves. Same reason we don't allow people to be married to their children or first cousins. So ginger has a mechanism, whereas it has its anthers, the male parts, come out and lay down along the bottom of the flower. Whoop, hello. So that they can only be pollinated by insects that will crawl across the anthers, pick up pollen, and then deposit it on the stigma or the female part of the flower that would then fertilize it. Later on in the season, those anthers curl up and actually curl over the anther so that the pollen can just fall down and it can self-pollinate. So it has a first chance of trying to pollinate, to cross-pollinate, and then it gives a second chance later on to try to self-pollinate. They really want to be pollinated, ideally cross-pollinated, but they'll settle for self-pollinated. Ginger I said in a video a while back that this ginger was related to the ginger that we have in the garden, or in the kitchen. It's not. I was wrong on that. I misheard and I misspoke. So I apologize for that. It does have a root that, if you pull it out, has a very strong ginger flavor, and people have used it for flavoring. Like anything that has these volatile compounds in it, they find problems with it. So people are saying these days that you shouldn't eat wild ginger, that there's compounds in there that are hazardous to your health. So I wouldn't necessarily eat it, but it does have a great ginger flavor, or great ginger smell. As we walk through the woods, here you've got more golden seal in bloom here. Talked about that last time. But I was going to talk about some of the shrubs. Most of the shrubs that you see as you scan through here are spice bush. But then there's some like this, which is, I call it cherry leaf viburnum because it's very descriptive. It's in the viburnum genus. It's opposite, like viburnums are. It's also called black haw, and it grows up into a tree along with being a shrub. So we have it, you can see it called cherry leaf because it looks kind of like, if you're familiar with what like a wild cherry looks like, it looks like a cherry leafed. So as a tree, where it grows up, here is black haw growing up in more of a tree form. We talked a little bit about this in our winter tree identification, talking about the opposite trees. But it's in bloom right now, which is really pretty. So I'll put in a picture of what the bud looked like, because I said that the bud looked like a snake that had swallowed a basketball or a baseball or something like that. That's because this whole flowering structure here, this looks like a cyme of white flowers, was in that little bud, packed in there, and it then bursts into bloom here. Very pretty looking. A little bit of smell, not much of smell. So that's black haw or cherry leaf viburnum. So talking about shrubs that are in bloom right now, this is Paw Paw. Paw Paw is known for the fruit that it gets. It gets a pretty good size fruit that I think tastes like kind of a custard, like a banana mango custard. I really like it. Julie doesn't really care for them. Has huge seeds in there. It's kind of like a pudding in a fruit. I like them. Some people don't. That's okay. So there's a whole patch here of Paw Paws. Paw Paws are interesting because they don't produce many fruit. They need to be cross-pollinated. We talked about that with ginger. It prefers to be cross-pollinated, but it's willing to self-pollinate if it needs to be. Paw Paws have a similar situation where the anthers don't develop at the same time that the stigmas do, so that it can't cross-pollinate that way. It may be that they're not self-fertile also, I don't know that, but supposedly they are available at the same time so that the same flower can't pollinate itself. But it also can't pollinate anything that it's related to. So it can't pollinate any other flowers on the tree. Now when you look at this patch of Paw Paws, and they go on over there, there's lots of flowers, have these maroon flowers, so again that they're interested in being pollinated by maybe beetles or flies, not by butterflies and bees. But all of these Paw Paws are likely the same plant. They just have root suckered. And so if it root suckers, you can get a whole big patch of Paw Paws way down yonder in the Paw Paw patch that are actually just one single individual. So this flower can't pollinate that one that's over there because that's actually the same individual. So if you're growing Paw Paws, you try to mix up your patches, or you could, whoa, we're dropping flowers here. Sorry, Cayenne, I dropped Paw Paw flowers all over. If you're trying to grow for Paw Paws, you can either force pollinate it. You can get pollen from a different colony and pollinate these flowers, or you can graft in branches that will flower from a different plant, and those would be able to cross-pollinate. So whenever we're walking in the woods, we have to take that opportunity to pick the honeysuckle that's sprouting up. That's a constant battle in the woods. And when they're at this stage, they weed pretty easily. So again, we weed the honeysuckle. Sure. Opposite leaves. This is Amur Honeysuckle. So it's got this acuminate tip, comes to a sharp point there. And then when I put it down, I'm going to put it down with the roots up so that they dry out and it dies. I notice over here We also have the other thing that we're picking hours upon hours these days is garlic mustard. Garlic mustard with its white flower, and you can see it's starting to set the seeds here. The seeds rising up. So, hi there. Did you want to get some garlic mustard? We keep thinking we need to train Kimber to seek out garlic mustard. So whenever we walk by, we need to pick it. Yeah, this is the first year. Garlic mustard grows in 2 years. It's a biennial. So this is the second year growth with this tall stalk that flowers in it. This little one here is the first year's growth. It grew up from seed this year. You can see the seed leaves here, the cotyledons that come up, and then it starts to grow here. So it will grow up this way and not be much bigger than this for the first year. And then next year, it will have a whole root system developed that will sprout up this major plant. So biennial, our goal is to try to get this while we can, so we don't want it to seed. So garlic mustard, like weeding anything, it's important that you pull out the roots. So I reach in at the base and then pull it out. It has this root that runs along the surface. It's real easy to weed, but you need to pull out that whole weed there. Let me show you, as long as I'm down here, we've got this patch of the white trout lily. We talked about that when it was in bloom. Has these leaves that are mottled like a trout skin. Trout lily doesn't spread by seed very well, but you find these big colonies, and that's because of this. If you look at this here, it will send up these little stolons from one plant to the next and will spread to form a colony without having to worry about seed production. Now then you get it's all genetically similar, so it's always good to have seed production, but it can spread without the seed production. This is a really pretty patch of Christmas fern here. Christmas fern, remember the old leaves, which are definitely dying back here, were green in the winter around Christmas time, and now it's sending up new leaves. You can see a little bit of the fiddlehead here. Christmas fern has this scaly, kind of hairy stem, and then the individual leaves have that appendage sticking out the side that make it look like a Christmas stocking. I know we talked about that before, but not everybody watches all the videos. So that's Christmas fern. And again, we've got the false Solomon's seal or Solomon's plume here. We've got the spring beauties, pretty patch of spring beauties right here. Right behind you, if we could just look at this briefly. This is Multiflora Rose, which is another very invasive plant. It's got these compound leaf, and at the base of the leaf, the way you tell Multiflora Rose from the other native roses is it has this feathery, what's called a stipule, this kind of leafy appendage at the base of the leaf. And this has all sorts of little feathers on it. That's Multiflora Rose. I would like to weed this, but it's covered with thorns, and it just, without gloves, it's not a good idea. So we're going to leave that and deal with it later. Just as review, we have Annual Bedstraw, or Cleavers, which sticks to your clothing with the tiny white flowers. Annual Bedstraw. It's a bedstraw just like the Wild Licorice that we looked at. It has this whirl of leaves, but it's got like 8 leaves where the Wild Licorice had 4 leaves. And it's called Annual Bedstraw because it is an annual. The Wild Licorice is a perennial. Okay, so Julie's telling me that I'm talking about tiny little flowers that nobody's going to care about, so we need to talk about some bigger things. So here's about as big as you get. This is Jack-in-the-pulpit. You can see this compound leaf here with this very intricate flower. Often it's green with red. It's really striking. This is just green. So the flower structure here is on this spadix. And then there's this spathe that covers it up. Jack-in-the-pulpit. Okay, so this is going to sound like I'm doing just what Julie told me not to do. We went and we talked about a bigger flower, and now I'm coming to probably the smallest flower that we've got here today, which is Chervil. And it has this kind of very dissected kind of carrot-like leaf, and then a very tiny flower. It's Chervil. So as I turn around, I see this pink flag. Pink flag to us indicates like a non-native. So this is a burning bush, a winged euonymus that I missed when I came through and cut them. I don't know if you can kind of see, there's a lot of stuff down on the ground. Most of it is ash trees that have fallen, but along with it is a lot of honeysuckle that we've cut and burning bush. So this is a burning bush that I missed, so I need to come back and cut this. It's actually in flower right now, so I don't know if you can get in there and see that. This is Euonymus alatus, burning bush, or winged euonymus. If you look at the stem here, you can see why it's called winged euonymus, because it has this corky stem. There's no, with an ant running across it. So we need to get that out because that'll produce seeds and spread through the woods. And we already spend a lot of time getting rid of weeds. We don't need to let it seed off and get more. Poison ivy. We should talk a little bit about poison ivy. I'll show you some poison ivy up here because it's just coming up, and if you're out in the woods, it's always a good idea to know what poison ivy looks like. So poison ivy, some people get poison ivy, some people don't. I get it pretty badly. I didn't get it when I was younger, so I kind of thought I was immune to it, but it's definitely, you hear the story pretty regularly. It's definitely something that you can not get it for a long period of time, and then every time you get it, it seems like it builds, and it's worse and worse. So this is poison ivy. And I'm not going to pick it and show it to you. Leaves of 3, let it be. You can see it's got these irregularly shaped toothed leaves. You know, some things have, I would rather you not get into it. You know, if Cayenne gets into it or Kimber gets into it and then we pet either of them later on, you can get it from that. They can transfer the oils to you. So I'm going to try to block him. But as it comes up in the spring, it's really shiny. It tends to be darker color, kind of have a purplish color. But there's other things that have kind of that same color that you don't want to confuse it with, because you don't want to be afraid of going out in the woods. But this is definitely poison ivy. Over here is Virginia creeper, which looks kind of like it. It's got a very similar color. I can actually pick this because I can show it to you. So very similar color, but this has 5 leaves. So Virginia creeper has 5 leaves, and poison ivy only has 3 leaves. And then the Virginia creeper has a very regularly serrated leaf, whereas the poison ivy has like a big lobe here, and then a smaller lobe, and a big lobe, and here they've got a big lobe here. It's very awkwardly lobed. Now I'm going to reach over here, because right next to us is what looks very much like the same type of thing. It's got kind of an awkwardly lobed 3 leaflets on a compound leaf, reddish stem. But this is box elder. Box elder has more of a matte finish, whereas the poison ivy, when it first comes up, is really shiny. And you can see the older leaves have started to lose that shininess. But box elder also is opposite. So the branching, if you look at it, it has a pair of leaves that come out. So that's the best way, I think, to tell box elder from poison ivy. Poison ivy is going to be alternate. You'll have a leaf come out, and then further on down you'll have another leaf come out. So box elder and poison ivy and Virginia creeper. Thanks for joining us today on this woodland walk. We got to see a lot of beautiful spring wildflowers. If you're interested in seeing more of this, and there's a lot more to be seen, because I'll tell you, there's a lot that's blooming, that's going to be blooming, and just a lot of interesting things going on in our woods. So if you're interested in seeing more, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. If you like this video, hit the like button. We always appreciate comments. If you've got questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. So thanks for joining us.